snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is Dr. Bird's Advice for Sad Poets, which is by Evan Roskos, and this is his debut novel. This is a contemporary book. Let me start out by saying that this is a book that was gifted to me by my aunt and uncle last year, and I wanted to read it this year because I hadn't got around to it, and they gave it to me last Christmas, and it's already Christmas here, so I thought, why not get onto this and read it? So I did read it, and I unfortunately didn't like it as much as I would have hoped. I'm not a huge contemporary fan, but I do have very mixed opinions when it comes to contemporary. Some I do enjoy, but usually not if it doesn't have a sort of dystopian feel or an interesting plot twist. Average contemporaries, where it's just completely set in our world, usually aren't that interesting to me, and unfortunately this one did fall into that trap, even though it has a beautiful cover, which I really like. So this is a story which follows a main character called James Whitman, and Whitman is a really messed up character. He has been through a lot of stuff in his life. His family is not a very stable family. They've had a lot of problems, and we get to his story when his sister has been kicked out of the house. He doesn't know why. He doesn't really know everything that went down between his parents and his sister to lead up to that, and he's kind of in a bad place mentally. This book really deals with depression. It deals with sort of exploring themes of suicide. It deals with themes of delusion. And it's interesting, but it just didn't grip me. One thing I didn't like about this story was that I felt the main character, James, was not the age he was supposed to be. He came across more as a kind of investigative young child who was maybe 10 or 11, when he's meant to be around 16 or something like that. So that was something that really let this down for me. I didn't feel like it was a convincing character and a convincing teenager. He just sort of felt a bit flat and a little bit too stupid, dare I say it. He didn't seem to really know what he was doing, and he didn't really get what was going on some of the time, and he questioned things that I already had guessed. It was a little bit obvious, and he just wasn't seeing things as clearly as he should have. One of the elements within this book that is interesting and a little bit different is that there are actually a lot of references to poetry, as the title might suggest. I don't tend to read a lot of poetry, and when I do, I only tend to read sort of nonsense or rhyming poetry that's quite funny and quite light-hearted. Whereas this focuses on Whitman, whom I've never read before, his poetry, because James Whitman shares the surname with Whitman the poet, and therefore he is interested in his work. Unfortunately, I am not so interested in Whitman's work. I didn't think he was a great poet. I didn't connect with the poetry, and I felt like it was just a little bit of a waste of space. I personally just didn't feel like his poetry was as interesting as James did within the story, and therefore I think I lost a bit of the enjoyment, which hopefully other readers who have read Whitman's work would get. A lot of the poems within this are really dark and really sad and depressing, and they don't really give a fun, light-hearted tone. It is a dark book. There are dark themes, and it's not a nice read overall. It's just kind of depressing to read. Mainly, it's an exploration of James and his personality and what he's been through and the things he's had to deal with, and how he copes with that, but it's also a kind of investigation into what happened with his sister. He goes around and he interviews various different people, he talks to them and finds out what has happened and how his sister is connected to whatever happened to them. That was interesting in a way. Like, I did want to find out why his sister had been kicked out, because obviously that's the main point. But there were also long passages where he sat down talking to therapists. There were long passages where he was just very unsure of himself, and he constantly flipped back between hating himself and enjoying his life and being happy. There are some comical bits to this which were redeeming factors. For example, he does actually imagine a pigeon who is called Dr. Bird, and he treats that as a therapist before he goes to a real one. And that was a really fun thing. I enjoyed that aspect of the story a lot because it was whimsical and it was enjoyable, and Dr. Bird obviously acts like a pigeon would and just kind of gives sideways looks or coos a lot, which was great. So that was a fun part of the story. However, I felt like that was let down by the fact that there weren't more scenes with Dr. Bird when the title is Dr. Bird's Advice for Sad Poets. I feel like that should have been a more prominent part. because they were the best bits. There were also moments which were funny. For example, he loves using the word yorp, which is quite an entertaining word and an enjoyable, fun word. He also likes to hug trees, and they were all likeable characteristics about him. I felt like that was a great thing to see. I get the impression he's meant to be kind of bipolar in this, because he really flips from one happy mood into a really depressed, sad mood, which I get, but I would have enjoyed to see more happy, because that would have made the read more enjoyable. He has a lot of conspiracy theories that he comes up with after talking to people, quite irrational, some of them. I didn't really find myself interested. I kind of ploughed through this story because it is quite a short one, but I wasn't enjoying it as I was going. It wasn't really captivating. It wasn't something I wanted to keep coming back to. And so overall it was just an okay read. Overall, I think this is more of a case of it's a gift book. It wasn't one that I chose for myself, and therefore it would have been lucky if it was going to be a 5-star read. Unfortunately, this one just kind of missed the mark. I'm not a huge contemporary fan, and it wasn't really for me because of the poetry and because of how depressing in tone it was. But if it does sound like something you want to pick up, it's well written otherwise, and I do feel like it's a decent read. It wasn't good in my standards, it was okay, but it wasn't a bad book either. There were definitely fun parts to it, and there was definitely a mystery, and there was things that were interesting. So if this does sound like the sort of thing you enjoy reading, then go ahead and pick it up. I ended up only giving it a 2 out of 5 stars, which isn't brilliant, but I would be really interested to see what you guys think. If any of you are into contemporary, then let me know what you think of this book overall, and if you are planning to read it, or if you have already read it. I don't think it's a hugely popular book, but it's a quirky one, and that's cool. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye! And you gonna have a little